Hello, everybody. Welcome to our session. I believe more people are going to join later on. My name is Eyal. Tuvia and I are from TechConnect, Western Australia. This is an event, one of many that we're going to have to enrich our knowledge in regard of specific items and areas that we are focused on. I'm going to start with who we are. Then I'm going to hand it over to Jared, our keynote presenter today. Just a few housekeeping items. We turn on the audio and the video right now. If you do have any questions or any items that you want to mention or go back to, please click the Q&A session at the top. At the end of the session, we left enough time to have an open conversation. So we're going to open microphones, we're going to open videos. So feel free to have a personal session and a personal discussion at the end about the subject. I'm personally very excited to hear this presentation because it's relevant to most of the stuff that we're all doing. And I'm very intrigued to know what is happening with the Australian market right now and going forward. So without further ado, Jared, please introduce yourself and take it from there.
Thank you, Eyal, and thank you, Tuvia, for putting this together, and thank you, everyone, for joining. I really do appreciate it. Now, I want to start by asking a question. Get you to think about a country that you may think that this would be. So I'm gonna state 3 facts, and I want you to think about what this country might be. So firstly, a state government and the federal government of this country will invest $940 million into a quantum computing startup. The second thing, this country has 3 venture outcomes with valuations larger than $25 billion. And the third thing, this country has produced 1.67 unicorns per $1 billion of VC investment, the second best statistic globally. Normally, when I ask people these 3 points and I say, who do you think it is? More often than not, the country comes up is Israel, the startup nation, the nation that has produced so many unicorns and some fantastic technology. Probably unsurprisingly, given what we're here to talk about today, the country that I'm actually referring to is Australia. And the point I want to make is, when people think about Australia, most people think agriculture, they think mining, but technology, startups is not something that typically comes up in Australia. Now, the Australian government and Australia as a whole is really looking to shift that mandate and shift the way people perceive and think about Australia. So I'll start by saying I love what Eyal, Tuvia, and TechConnect are doing. I think it's fantastic and really great timing in terms of what Australia as a country is looking to do. A little bit about me. So I'm currently the CEO of an investment manager called Blackwattle Investment Partners. Like so many of you, I left a corporate job and decided to move into starting my own business with a number of other people, because I'm of the belief that we can do things better. Now, when I talk about doing things better, we're a funds management business that is centered around alignment with our investors, alignment with all our stakeholders, alignment with all the staff and everyone involved. And really the drive for me was to come in and ultimately take what I believe is quite a legacy industry and bring it to today and improve upon it. In terms of my background, prior to joining Blackwattle, I was in banking. I was at Citigroup, Macquarie Bank, Commonwealth Bank of Australia, where I was involved in a number of IPOs, M&A transactions, working with other fund managers and corporates alike. I also brought into Australia a US-based business called Union Square Capital Advisors, where again, we're advising corporates within Australia in terms of moving into the US and vice versa, US companies coming out to Australia. So I've had a lot of experience in this space and really appreciate your interest in Australia as a country. So the next step, just a disclaimer, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not giving any advice, but love to have a discussion with all of you, as Eyal said. So before I get onto specific topics, I'm just going to give a quick overview of what I'm going to talk to today. The first is just a very high-level introduction to Australia, our economy, and as I said, some of the myths and otherwise that may be in place. The investment landscape here. I know often, and speaking to Eyal and Tuvia, often when people look to come into a new country, raising capital is something that is important, and I'll give a little bit of an overview about that. The global opportunities within Australia. We are often referred to as the gateway to APAC, and I'd like to give you a little bit more information on that. Conducting business here and how you can do so. And then finally, and most importantly, why now? Why I think now is an excellent opportunity for someone to come to Australia and look at us as an expansion opportunity. So very quick snapshot on Australia. I know we're not quite as small as Israel and some other countries, but we're at 26.6 million people. So on the global scale, not huge. But we like to think we do bat above our average, so to speak. You'll see shortly we are the 13th largest economy in the world by GDP. We have the record for the longest uninterrupted GDP growth, almost 30 years, and that ended due to COVID. You can see the industry that we are dominated by, primarily service sectors, mining, education, finance, construction, and agriculture, which, as I said, is really how a lot of people think of Australia. But as I'll show you, technology is something that's really shifting. We are one of the world's most highly educated workforces. Approximately 48% of employed people hold tertiary qualifications. And the population is growing fast. As you can see, that 2.4% annual growth. We are growing quickly as a population, and have strong export partnerships across a number of different nations, which again, I will go into a little bit more detail as we go through the presentation. We can't talk about Australia without talking about housing. And for those of you who have been to Australia or living in Australia, every barbecue, every conversation that's had is typically there's something centered around housing. Now you can see there from a residential dwelling perspective, Australia it's pretty high in terms of the pricing of property, $934,000 on average. If you move to some of the larger cities like Sydney, that's over the $1 million mark, and we are seeing continued growth in property. The one thing that I found quite interesting, and thank you for those of you who submitted questions beforehand, was someone asked about non-bank credit landscape in Australia and their ability to move into the landscape. Given Australia's obsession, so to speak, with housing, there's been a huge growth in property lending here. You can see in the slide the 186% household debt. But more recently, there's been a real big push for non-bank lending. And the reason for that is we've seen an increase in regulation for the banks, an increase in the need to hold specific capital, which has meant we've seen a number of non-bank lenders come in. As rates have moved, again, that's created opportunities. So, for the people that were asking about opportunities in that non-bank space, great opportunity here, particularly around property. And I'm sure Tuvia, Eyal, or get in contact with me and I can point you in the right direction. Another article which was recently out, which was quite interesting, was I spoke about the 3 companies over a $25 billion valuation that Australia have produced. One of which is a company called Canva that some of you maybe have used and may be aware of. There was recently a round where a number of the founders and shareholders exited. And the article spoke about the fact that most of that money is going into property, back into investing in property, where, in other economies in the world, you would see that going into other venture capital opportunities. So again, just really showing how centric Australia is around that housing and property growth. As I mentioned earlier, we are the world's 13th largest economy if you look at GDP growth. The other thing that's really worth pointing out is just the wealth of Australia. So Australia has the world's second highest median wealth per adult, and ran 6th in the OECD for housing net wealth. Now, to put that into context, 6 million households generate an income above US $75,000 per year. We're a strong consumer economy, and Australians do spend money. So, particularly if you've a product which is looking at that individual, the consumer space, it's somewhere that there is disposable income, high net worth, and you'll see that is forecast to continue to stay high, given the high minimum wages and employment opportunities in this country. From a governance perspective, the legal system is highly rated, corruption is low, we have strong public service. And as I mentioned earlier, one of the big things we're seeing is a real pro-business environment coming through to attract foreign investment. The close to $1 billion investment I spoke about on the quantum computing landscape, that was the Australian government in conjunction with the Queensland government. They are bringing the headquarters of the quantum computing company back to Australia to try and really generate jobs, build new growth opportunities, and it's a real strong drive for the country. Australia has a AAA credit rating, and it's very easy to start a business here. And again, I will take you through some of the options as we go through the presentation. Given we're talking to TechConnect, and I know a lot of you are in that technology industry, I thought it was worthwhile just to break down a little bit more about the tech industry in Australia. Now, as I said from the outset, most people see Australia as a mining and agriculture, but a lot don't see the technology growth that's coming through. And you can really see the push for technology in that growth. Our entrepreneurs and academics work really well together. We've seen track record of incubation in this country, and that's really a continued push. Australia is a nation of early adopters, and I think that's another key thing outside of just the strong disposable income. For those of you who have a technology product coming into Australia, Australians are willing to be early adopters and take on new opportunities quite ahead of the curve. Again, to put it into context, if technology was taken as one industry, the technology will be the third largest industry in Australia at 8.5% of GDP. So technology is a large industry here. There is a continued push for it, and the government are generally really wanting to see the growth continue. Now, again, to put it into context, someone wrote a question about cybersecurity. And thank you again. Look forward to having that open dialogue when we get to that point. But one thing, again, with the Australian government is the government released what was called the cybersecurity strategy. And that's committed close to $600 million to becoming a world leader in cybersecurity by 2030. There's huge demand, particularly out of Asia, coming into Australia. And in terms of cybersecurity growth, it's growing at 9% per annum on average in this country. So there's a real push for those of you who are in the cybersecurity industry or game. Great opportunity to come out here. There is government funding behind it. There is Asia growth looking to come into this country as well. The other part I'd be remiss not to talk about is clean energy in Australia. We're often referred to as the lucky country. We are lucky because we have got a significant amount of natural resources, vast natural resources. We're a leader in renewable energy, and we are taking action on climate change. Lithium, as we see the growth in batteries, is particularly strong. We're the largest producer in the world of lithium, strong large reserves of zinc, nickel, tantalum, and some of the other requirements of clean energy. So really, when you look at the country, we're in a great spot as we see the shift towards clean energy. Any of you who have technologies in this space, another extremely exciting opportunity to come in and utilize the infrastructure, the push towards that net zero and the growth that's continuing to happen. So that's a very quick overview on Australia, who we are, the economy, and a little bit about why I think it's a really interesting opportunity to look at Australia right now. The next step I want to move on to is the investment landscape. Now, as I said, I know a lot of you, if you are looking to move into a new country or potentially looking at a new market, may need funding. So what does the landscape look like here? Australia, despite being a relatively small country in population, has the 5th largest superannuation or pension assets globally. We call it superannuation. Total superannuation assets were $3.7 trillion at the end of 2023, and they're increasing quite significantly. I don't know if you can see the bottom table. What that's showing you is essentially the superannuation rate was at 10%. Every year it's growing up until next year, where it gets to 12%. So of any income that's made, 12% will be continually reinvested back into funds, and people are looking for places to invest that capital. One of the big shifts we've been seeing is what's called self-managed super funds, where individuals can now manage their own superannuation. And that gives them a lot more flexibility on where they put it. So we're seeing, moves into things like venture capital funds, moves into things like crowdfunding platforms, and the ability for people to have more flexibility and agility on their investments. So again, great opportunities. There is capital looking for that. In terms of our stock market, Australia is the 13th largest globally, one of the trillion-dollar economies. In terms of the sectors, probably unsurprisingly, financials and materials are two of the larger ones. Technology is quite small in terms of the ASX 200, but we have seen a lot of investors raising money through the stock market, even without needing venture capital. So a good example, you may have heard of a company called Afterpay. They were taken over by Block, another one of the $25 billion plus exits that came out of Australia. For them, the way they actually started and got their funding was through a stock market listing. So they listed on the market, raised capital that way, and Australian investors are more willing to look at stock market, especially pre-revenue opportunities, than most other countries. And there's one simple reason for that, and that's because our investors in Australia are very comfortable with resources-based investments. A lot of the market, as you can see in that split, are resources. Now, when you are investing in a resources company, there is often a huge amount of capital requirement to get the mine up and running, to do the drilling, to make sure it's going to work. Then you've got to build out the plant, build out the infrastructure, get it happening. So there's a huge amount of capital required prior to seeing money coming in. Not too dissimilar in often cases to a technology company, where you've got to put in significant amount of CapEx, build your platform, build your infrastructure, build an MVP, and then get to the point where you can actually make the money. So again, Australian investors are a fair bit more understanding than a lot of other countries in terms of pre-revenue opportunities. And so that's not something, if where you are is a pre-revenue space, that is something that should detract you from the Australian market. The other component in Australia, which is not quite as big as other parts of the market, but I do want to talk about is private equity and venture capital. Again, if you look at the bottom left corner, you can see where a lot of the interest has been. Cyber has been the big driver in Q1 2024. Biotech, medtech, fintech. So there's a lot of interest in the tech space. The other thing that's interesting is just the amount of dry powder that is out there. Top right corner, you can see those are the VC funds and PE funds, and just how much dry powder there is in this country. People are certainly looking for investment opportunities. Additionally, with the crowdfunding platforms that I mentioned, the government has allowed companies to go out into crowdfunding platforms and raise money that way. For us at Blackwattle, we needed to raise money to bring our investment firm to light. The way we did it was through taking some really experienced individuals, where we managed to get experienced individuals from experienced places, put in place a 5-year business plan, and went out to some of the high net worth venture VC type opportunities. And we managed to raise over $20 million, which has now given us significant working capital as we build out the business and we continue to do what we're doing. So I want to stress the fact there is capital in Australia that is looking for the right opportunities. In terms of foreign investment, worth noting that foreign investment continues to grow really fast. As a percentage of GDP, it's gone from 124% 2002 to 2003 to 183%. So really strong growth. We're seeing a lot of it come out of Asia. China's been growing on average 12% per annum. Interestingly, Canada 12%, but then Japan and Singapore 9% as well. So a lot of investment coming in from Asia, and I will touch a little bit more on those Asian markets. But I really see that as an exciting opportunity. And as I spoke to before, Australia is often seen as the gateway to APAC. And this to me is a really exciting opportunity to do so. What we've been seeing most recently in terms of some of the trends is we're seeing a lot of M&A in the Australian market. The Aussie dollar compared to the US dollar and some other currencies has come back quite a bit. Been seeing a lot of money coming into the Australian market from places such as China and Hong Kong as people are looking for relative safety, so to speak, around the region. So we've been seeing a lot of capital coming in from Hong Kong, from China and other parts, M&A into property, and that's fueling some of this foreign direct investment. Currently, one of our investment banks down here are running a big conference, and they said that they, in terms of the interest from offshore, the amount of people coming in from Asia in particular, it's one of the largest they've been seeing. So Asia are really focusing on Australia as an opportunity. So good segue onto some of the global opportunities and why I think Australia is something that should be looked at as a gateway to the world. The first point is Australia is a very globalized economy. We have 18 free trade agreements with countries including the US, China, Korea, Japan, Singapore. But importantly, Australia is actively negotiating new agreements with a number of countries. So last year, we struck one with the UK, India in 2022, and there's continued growth happening in those spaces. The APEC, Australian Pacific Economic Cooperation, accounts for over 60% of the global GDP, and again, really strong membership, really strong partnership with those countries. Interestingly, 75% of our trade are with those APEC countries. And we think the easy access to those markets is the gateway for growth within Australia. So I keep making this a point, but China is our largest trading partner, accounting for 27% of our trade. And more than 40% of our exports go to the likes of Japan, Korea, India, Taiwan, Singapore. It's a really, really exciting opportunity. And Ayal and I spoke about this prior to this event, but the one thing that a lot of people are underestimating is the consumerization of these Asian markets and just how fast these markets are growing and becoming consumer-based markets. We've seen a number of Australian products grow exceptionally strongly out of these Asian markets. Great examples have been milk formula, baby products, a lot of health, beauty, food products, even technology into those Asian regions because as they consumerize, as wealth grows, they are looking for higher quality products. And I think this is something that really needs to be stressed. You'll see on the right, I spoke about I put up about the new Southeast Asian economic strategy. Now, Southeast Asia is one of the fastest growing regions in the world. So what a lot of people underestimate are places like Indonesia, which alone is predicted to become the world's 4th largest economy by 2050. So you've got China, Indonesia, some of these really strong Southeast Asian markets. And the growth in these markets is going to be exceptionally strong. By 2040, the suggestions that after-tax income of these households will be 10 times larger than in Australia. So again, that consumerization, the growth in these markets, and the opportunities to come to Australia, utilize that as a gateway into APAC is something that shouldn't be underestimated. So how do you come into Australia and conduct business here? The first thing I'll say is business in Australia is, as I mentioned before, we've got strong legal laws, very, very established government-based, very supportive governments looking to drive business and consumers. But how would you do it? And again, I want to say I'm not a lawyer, but I have had experience bringing a business into Australia, which I mentioned before was Union Square Capital Advisors. I know actually someone who had registered for the for this event is in immigration employment lawyer, so they might be able to help, and Eyal, two of you can certainly help with this. But the two main ways I've seen it is through either a branch office or a subsidiary. Now, when I brought Union Square Capital Advisors into Australia, we used a subsidiary, which is a separate legal entity, and to be honest, is the most common way we see them come in. It's a proprietary company, limited by shares, and again, is completely separate. You can then have the other option that we sometimes see as a branch office, which is registering the foreign company in Australia, but it's not a separate legal entity. Again, I'm not going to give any legal advice, but those are the two main ways that I see it to come into place. It's not difficult to start a business. You can launch and get it up pretty easily. It costs a few $100s, and within day you can be up and running. So it's quite a straightforward process in Australia to do so. The other thing, as I mentioned, the real push from the Australian government for new business growth and for people coming in. A few of those initiatives that I think are quite fantastic and should be taken advantage of if you are coming to this country. It's a number of R&D tax incentives that deliver close to $3 billion a year to eligible companies. These include tax offsets that's equal to your corporate rate plus an additional premium of up to 18.5%. So some really good R&D tax developments. Any of you in that tech space that's doing R&D and requiring growth, great space to look into. There's other tax levers such as CapEx in the future can benefit from depreciation. SMEs, which is up to $15 million in turnover, pay a corporate tax rate of 25% instead of 30%. We've also got something which is quite unique in this country called franking credits. And what that means is that you only pay corporate tax rates once. So if a company has paid their 25 or 30% tax credit and then delivers a dividend to an Australian resident, that shareholder can then, when they pay their personal tax, offset their personal tax with the corporate tax that's already been paid. So again, quite a good incentive for individuals in Australia. And the other one I want to highlight are the tax concessions to encourage venture capital investment. So there's things called the venture capital limited partnerships, the early stage venture capital limited partnerships, and they provide really, really beneficial tax treatments. I haven't put this on here, but something we've used in Blackwattle is also called the startup early stage provisions around employee share option plans. So you can incentivize employees through share option plans and essentially defer the tax required on those in time. Again, not giving any tax or accounting or financial advice, but those are some of the structures that can be looked at and should be looked at with the appropriate advice if you are to come into this country. In terms of a great reference point, we have what's called Austrade in this country, and Austrade is really here to help bring foreign investment, foreign businesses into Australia. I'll put a link there. I believe the slide deck will be sent out post this, so you can click on the link. I have made it clickable. But that really will just talk through some of the key statistics of Australia, some of the industries, how Austrade can actually help. So make sure to leverage not only TechConnect WA and what Eyal and Tuvia are putting together, but also the Australian government and what's available to do so. Because as I mentioned, there really is a big push to drive business investment into this country. Also, a couple of people asked about immigration opportunities and network opportunities in Australia. Network opportunities, what Ayal and Tuvia are doing is obviously fantastic and a great place to start. I cannot provide immigration advice, but again, Ayal and Tuvia can certainly point you in the right direction. I know that there were some legal practices as part of the network that I mentioned earlier who were in immigration as well. So please do speak to the team after this if that is of interest. But what I can tell you is the Australian economy is growing fast. You know, there is a big push for immigration. So for the right businesses, people, opportunities, that there is that opportunity to come into the country. And the real question is why now? So I've given you a good overview of Australia, given you a good overview of why it's interesting. You know, we talk about the economic growth here, spoken about the APAC opportunity, spoken about what's happening from a government perspective, but why is now the opportune time? And as we look at May 2024, the first thing is the currency. And I touched on this before when I spoke about what's happening with a lot of foreign investors coming in here. We're seeing a lot of M&A. We're seeing a lot of interest in the Australian market. The Australian dollar is now trading at about 66 cents to the US dollar. You can see on that chart how it's traded over time, and it really is close to the lows. You know, there have been times where it's pulled back further, but you know, we don't get a lot lower than this. So for those of you who already have a business and might be earning US dollars or other revenue sources, you know, coming into Australia is a great timing from a currency perspective. And I think, you know, in terms of bang for your buck, so to speak, is something that is really, really interesting, particularly if you are earning US dollar revenue. The other point to note is the wealth transfer and the demographics that are taking place. So as per that image I've got there, which is from Vanguard, Australia is going to have the largest wealth transfer in history. It'll be $3.5 trillion that are going to be inherited from the baby boomer generation over the next 20 years. A lot of that has been built in property wealth, in business wealth, in the success we've seen in Australia, but that is going to be moving into the hands of the younger generation. The younger generation, as we know, are more akin and are looking for more technology opportunities. Australia are an early adopter. They are a country that do like to spend, are consumer based. So as this moves into the hands of the younger demographics, the younger demographics are going to be continually looking for opportunities. So I think this is another real shift, paradigm shift that we're going to see in this country as per that diagram over the next 20 years as people start to move assets to the younger generation. The other thing is about APAC. And I spoke about Australia being the gateway to APAC. And I really do believe APAC is an exciting opportunity, not just for Australia, but globally. Now, this chart on the left shows you the number of households with disposable income of more than $75,000 per annum. You can see number one is the US, not too surprisingly. But what I want to point out is the number of countries that are moving up in that scale from Asia. So you can see Australia sitting at number 6, and that will stay at number 6 according to forecasts. But above it is China. China's current was 2022 was number 34. It's going to go from 34 to number 5. Underneath, you see the ASEAN 6. That's going to move up substantially. Singapore, Hong Kong, New Zealand, these are markets all within our economic time, and they are going to be doing a huge amount of growth going forward. So you can really see, and this is what I mentioned before, is that consumerization that's coming through. You've got large populations in China, in India, that are all of a sudden getting to a point where disposable income is starting to grow. They're starting to earn money, and they are looking for places as a consumer environment to actually deploy that capital. With the free trade agreements that I spoke about earlier, with the relations that Australia have, being within the same time zone is something that really does create an exceptional opportunity as we see that consumer-based growth. The other thing that we've seen is a real improvement in relations with China and throughout a number of our industries. So if we go back a few years, China put on some tariffs across Australia when we saw some of the trade wars with the US. Over time, and particularly with the new Labor government that's in place, we've been seeing a big shift in relations with the Chinese government. This article here is dated late March this year, where the Chinese government officially abolished tariffs on Australian wine. And we're seeing, not just in wine, but generally across the economy, we're seeing an improvement in relations, an improvement in trading, which ultimately creates significant opportunities as we see the Chinese economy and other Asian economies build that disposable income of wealth, consumerize and look for opportunities and places to put their money. Now, I know there's been a lot to get through. As I said, I want to make sure that there is time to also have some Q&A, because as Eyal said, we wanted to make this an open forum. We wanted to have the opportunity to chat and open this up for questions. I will say, as I said, this will be sent to all of you. Thank you for attending. Please get in touch with me via LinkedIn's the best way to do so. I'm sorry, that's not a great way to, the link's not that easy to read, but please, Jared Rubin, Jarred, Rubin, Rubin, and as I said, that will come through. But Eyal, I'll hand it over to you, and it'd be great to open it up to Q&A.
Yes, so Tuvia, if you're still there, maybe you can open the ability to talk and the cameras. So if anyone has any questions verbally, that would be great. I see that some people started to write on the chat. First of all, maybe you should put your LinkedIn information in the chat, Jared, so everybody will have it.
Perfect, that's a good idea.
Yep. Tuvia, can you open the microphones?
Yeah, I opened no microphones for everyone.
All right. Anyone has any questions, anything that they want to go over? We have a few more minutes, and we wanted to have small meetings like that so we can have those interactions and discussions. This was a very, very good presentation. Thank you, Jared. And obviously there was a lot of data over there. So I have a few questions, but I'll defer to you guys. Anyone has any questions?
And Eyal, I did see, thank you, Michael. Michael Platt has put in his details from Austrade. So it's great to have Michael on, and please do use the resources from Austrade, because they're a fantastic network that they built there. Sorry, Avraham, I think you were going to ask a question.
Yeah, thanks. First of all, this is a great presentation. Thank you for that. Just about my background, I'm a cybersecurity expert located already in Australia with the PR, and I'm looking for opportunities here in the business aspect, and I try to research about the market, but I try to figure out what is the overview of the ICT in here? I mean, from your point of view, forgot about me.
So when you say ICT, that's specifically around cyber?
Yeah, but I saw, as far as I understand, I saw the cybersecurity as part of the IT industry, which is, it is what it is, but it's not the major industry like in Israel, which I know it before. But what is your overview? Can you please help me up to understand? I saw it a little. It more services like R&D. There is no R&D at all, actually, except two big companies that you already mentioned. But kind of overview to understand how I should approach the market. Should I serve my dream is to bring here some advanced technologies from Israel, but I don't know how to manage it. Maybe maybe I need your services, but this is the question.
No, perfect. I mean, I think a great place to start, Abraham, I don't know if you've had a look at the cybersecurity strategy that was released by the Australian government.
I saw that. Yes.
So that would be a great place to start because there's a significant amount of investment that's going into the space. I think to your point, the government agrees that there's probably not enough of an industry here, and given the interest out of Asia, it's something that should be invested in. So they are certainly looking for places to invest capital. They are looking for opportunities. So I think that would be a great place to start, is have a look at what are the specific industries, relevant places that framework is looking to put capital to. Perhaps, and as I haven't studied the framework that closely, but perhaps there may be an opportunity to bring some technology from Israel, as you say, into Australia, leveraging the capital that the Australian government's putting into this place to really drive the business that you're looking to build. So that would be a starting point that I would think to. I would also get in touch with Michael at Austrade, because Austrade are a great resource, and again that they are looking at a lot in the technology space. So I think leveraging the government, the networks as much as you can is a really great place to start. And looking at those government grants that are available, there are a lot of government grants, not just regarding cybersecurity, but generally in regards to R&D and other technology-based applications that you might be looking to bring in. So I think there is great opportunity. I think it's just researching and finding the niches and places that the money is being put into, and trying to leverage it that way. So hopefully that's helpful, Abraham.
I can also add something
yeah, please,
about cybersecurity. Hi. Just in my network here in Perth, we have about 2-3 Israeli companies. I mean, companies established by Israelis, cybersecurity companies. You can find the links, obviously, in my LinkedIn account. In my connections, if you want, you can just ask me. I know about at least one company, Israeli company. It has about 50 developers here in Perth. So in addition, with regards to cybersecurity, Australia issue global talent visas to cyber security specialists. So you're already in Australia, but for people who want to come here, it is a very good opportunity, I think.
Yeah, I arrived in Global Talent International, and thank you. And Tuvia, I will contact you too also after that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Abraham. And I've just posted the link for that cyber security strategy that I spoke about as well.
Thanks.
Hi, I would like to ask a question, if I may.
Sure,
Can you
thanks,
hear me?
Asaf. Yeah, we can hear you, Asaf.
So we are developing a software for non-bank lenders. I'm the one that sent you that question. I don't know if I'm the only one. Anyway, each country has its own lending structure and restrictions. What would you advise us if we would like to partner with an integrator or even a non-bank lending companies in Australia for having them as a design partner and learn more about how we can implement our software into that country?
Yeah, no, thank you for the question, Asaf. And as I said, the place to start from my perspective in Australia is the property market. There is a huge amount of lending that goes into that space, both bank and non-bank. And I think what strategically the play would be to do some research on that. There's a number of those non-bank lenders in the Australian market, some of which are a little bit more fintechy in nature that might be worth exploring. Yeah, so if you contact me on LinkedIn, I can send you a list of some of the non-bank lenders that we have here.
Already did.
Great, perfect. Both the traditional and the more fintechy, and it'd be worth having conversations because it's absolutely a space that we're seeing growth in. As I said, from a capital requirements perspective, there's been additional capital requirements, prudential requirements put on the banks, which has meant that we've seen an increase in non-bank lending growth. So I'll touch base with you via LinkedIn and shoot you through some companies that would be worth looking at.
Thank you very much.
May I add something? Asaf, you may also contact me. I work with Celsius, the Israeli company, and I know some people in here in the fintech. So just send me an invitation in the LinkedIn. My name is Avia, not Avram, the nickname, and I will contact you here.
Can you write your name in the chat because I can see only part of your name.
Yeah, I understand it.
Teams is not.
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure.
Beautiful. We're just connecting. That's what TechConnect is all about. You see, people are starting to connect. Beautiful, helping each other. I love it. It's a community, guys, and this is exactly what we want to do, help each other here. As I said, TechConnect is a non-profit organization to do exactly that. So whatever you can help each other, this is great. Jared, if I may ask a question, I see that there are more questions coming from the chat, but I want to ask you a question that is a little bit different. If everything is so great and Australia is obviously, based on your presentation, is amazing and everybody should pay attention to it and so forth, nobody's dumb. What I've heard, again, I'm kind of newbie to Australia, is that there is kind of a wrinkle here. If you want to do business in Australia, you need to be serious about Australia. That's what I heard more than once from people, and says, don't be that company that is trying to sell to the US and on the road wants to get some revenue from Australia. Talk to me about actually the challenges, why companies are not succeeding, why large companies in software, which is not that prevalent as of yet, maybe it will, but how do we make Australia, what are the key elements to make Australia another satellite, another tech nation? You know what I mean? Because as you said, we saw the wheelchair you had over there, it's mining, real estate. How do we emphasize, how do we help each other and make Australia more of a tech nation?
Great question, Al. I think the first component to your point is a lot of countries or companies don't come into Australia, like you said, seriously. They might have one individual that's just sitting out here, different time zone. It's very difficult if you're doing it that way, because as we know, right now, I know it's your morning. In most of you in Israel, it's close to 6 p.m. here in Australia, so that communication is difficult. I think the first point, you're right, it has to be done seriously. So you're going to come out here, I would say establish a proper company out here, have people on the ground looking at the landscape, preferably people with experience and networks. I love what you're doing here, building networks, because Australia is, some would say, quite a cliquey country, so to speak. There's people have built strong networks, and you need to leverage those people who have been here for some time and have the network. So I think investing in the right people. Now, the thing on that, and I think what a lot of people find quite difficult, Al, to be honest, is because the Australian minimum wage is quite high relative to a lot of the world, it's expensive. So you need to have capital to commit to Australia to get the right people and to come in and do it appropriately. I think if you think you're going to come in here and just bootstrap and do it on the cheap, I think you're destined to fail. I think you've got to say, well, we're going to commit, a significant amount of time, resources, get the right people on board and do it that way. Is the first point. I think the other component is the fact that, to be honest, the Australian government hasn't put a huge amount of resource until recently in the startup space, in building new companies. And I think the government are trying to shift that, and that's where we're seeing the shift in things like investment into companies. We're seeing these tax and grants coming through. So it will take time. It's not just going to happen overnight, but I think that things are moving in the right direction to see business, to see government moving in that framework to get there. But you're right. I mean, it's not going to be something that takes overnight. And I think, to your point, you need to understand that if you're going to do it, it's going to take time. I think then, step one, you've got to build a framework. You've got to build a foundation in Australia. Step two is then looking at APAC and some of the other Asia countries we spoke about. And again, you're going to need to commit capital. You're going to need to commit people on the ground. You're going to need to have the right systems, processes, etc., to do it properly, because they're going to think the same way as everyone does in Australia. You don't want someone that's just coming in fly by night and then leaving in a year or two. So I think, as you say, it has to be done seriously. I think the right people, the patience required, the capital required, and to me, that's what's really important.
Yeah, beautiful.
I have seen there is a question on the chat just around VCs. I'll share my screen again because there is a slide that I had on here, which is there you go.
Yeah, that's a very good question.
Talks to the interest around what we're seeing in private equity and venture capital. And so, look, I think the first point is that there has been a drop-off in total deals and total capital, which I think has been the case everywhere, not just in Australia. And you can see that by the top left chart. But where there's interest is certainly, and Avraham speaking to cyber and privacy, there's significant interest there. Biomed and medtech and fintech is where we're continuing to see interest, as you can see. I think the other space is that climate tech or clean tech. As I said, the fact that Australia has got the resources here, for things like solar, for things like battery power, we've got significant and vast resources that allow us to be able to test and try things. So, I think that those are where we're seeing and we'll continue to see that interest. I think cyber's, a lot of that's driven by government, by what's happening just globally in cyber. I think, Australia's not alone where we're seeing corporates, unfortunately, having more and more cyber incidents. Fintech is a function of, we've had some great fintech success stories. Buy now, pay later. We've seen, Afterpay is one I mentioned. There's another called ZipPay. We actually saw some Israeli companies list on the ASX with buy now, pay later fintech opportunities. And as I mentioned before, with the banks and some of the changes that are happening from a regulation prudential space, we are seeing more fintechs come into this space as well. So I think those are three key areas, and then biotech, medtech as well. We have had some real success stories in that space. A really good one is the cochlear implant, which came out of Australian government and has been built into a global phenomenon, and a number of other tech, med and biotech type implementations have been quite successful here. So those would be the four that I point out, but it's worth having a look at that table and the shift of where private equity and VC have been moving and going to. I mean, I think the thing that's interesting is when you look at the bottom table, the most deals by sector, climate tech has been at the top, fintech at the second or first for quite some time. So I think as you look over those last 18 months, there's certainly been those two have been standouts at the top of the market. Hopefully that's helpful. And so I think there's another one there. And how strong are the startups and high-tech technologies in Australia? From Israel's perspective, I really hear companies saying, let's focus on Australia. Now that's really interesting, AJ. And I think that's a fair point. And going back to what Eyal asked earlier and what I was saying, Australia hasn't been known as a high-tech place. And I think it's something that the government's realised, and we need to shift and change, and that's where the focus is coming from. So I don't think that, you know, globally people think of Australia and think of high tech and think of startups. That's not the case. But what I'm saying is now is an opportunity to get behind the government funding, get behind what's happening, and is something that's happened, that's, you know, changing. As I mentioned at the start, you know, the investment from the government, when we look at the 3 companies I spoke to that were $25 billion plus venture exits, it's Canva that I spoke to, Afterpay that I've mentioned, and Atlassian, which is a large global player as well. But we're seeing a number of other tech players coming through the market as well. We're seeing VC funding come in, and as I said, I think this is a really interesting opportunity as we see that shift coming through. So hopefully, when people start to think of places, tech, you know, I think as we start to see the growth in Asia and people will continue to think about Asia, I think more and more Australia comes to the forefront as that gateway to APAC, which I've mentioned before as well. Daniel, are there noteworthy hubs of startups and VCs? Okay, great question. So in terms of the hubs across Australia, I mean, if you look at in the past, the West Coast WA has been known as quite mining, resources heavy. It's great to see what Tuvia and Eyal are doing shifting that with the technology and what's coming in. You know, there has been a lot of immigration, as Tuvia said, out of Israel and other parts into Western Australia, which has seen a growth in tech. I think on the eastern seaboard, which is New South Wales, Queensland, Victoria, Sydney, and Melbourne, that's been more so known as the traditional services type spaces. When we think about finance, we think about, you know, housing, construction, those sort of things. I think a lot of the VCs and actual, you know, PE type firms are more on the East Coast. I'll let Tuvia talk more about what's happening in WA, but from what I see, you know, there's a real strong presence on the East Coast. I think in terms of startups, to be honest, we're seeing that come right across Australia. So the $1 billion investment in the quantum computing that I mentioned, that's from the Queensland government and the Australian government. So they're doing a big push to get people to move to Queensland, to Brisbane. The New South Wales government, we've been seeing some big pushes here for startups. Government have funded some startup spaces. I'm in the CBD just around the corner from us, where people can go and work from, build ideas, and so there is a real effort to build that. But I wouldn't say it's like a Tel Aviv or a Silicon Valley where there's one space in particular that we're seeing all the growth come from. Tuvia, you'd know more about WA, so I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, I can add here a few words. Okay, so I'm involved in the startup community here in Perth and generally in Australia. I have my own startup. I have two IT companies. So it's not the same as in Israel. First, so it's not. We don't have here 8,000 startups. In Australia, we do have startups. We do have hubs. So the situation here is a bit different, maybe from Israel. So here, the government very want to invest in startups, but there are not many startups yet. So it's not as many as we might have in Australia here. So but on the other hand, it is a big room here for startups to come here. And so, for example, in my case, we have here in Perth. Okay, I'm talking now only about Perth specifically. We have here a startup community. We have here startup meetings, meetups, almost every day. So if you want to go, so you have where to go for to meet other startups. We have here one governmental fund. It's not the same as in Israel. So here the funding is coming from mostly from tax return, and also from grants for early stage startups. So there are many options to find angels. For example, here in Perth, currently most of the angels like to invest more in the mining industry because it's what's going on here, and so they know that they can't lose in mining. It's less chances to lose in mining. But yeah, so we have here also big companies. For example, Australia is home to Atlassian. So I think that everyone who uses software knows what is Atlassian, Jira, and Confluence. So it's based in Melbourne and Sydney. And the Canva is also Australian company. Yeah, but again, it's not the same as in Israel. We probably will have another webinar about startup community here in Australia. So yeah, it's
Tuvia, just to understand, you're talking about grants and stuff like that, because you say it's relevant for companies who migrate to Australia. Like, is there a way for an Israeli company to get grants from the Australian government?
Yeah,
Let's say
I understand the question.
if they penetrate the
Yeah, I
market.
understand the question. Yeah, so Australia is less known in Israel as a target to come with your company. You know, so most of Israeli companies traditionally, I would say, move to US and Great Britain probably. Okay, but the soil here in Australia is, I would say, even much better than in the US and or Great Britain, because first, Australia is a country with a lot of money to invest in startups, and for example,
sorry
in
for the
Perth,
interruption. I'm
huh?
just
Yeah, yeah.
asking. I'm just asking. Must a company open a branch in Australia to get
Oh
grants?
no. Some companies have here, I mean, agents, let's say. I know here we just hosted here 2 months ago Israeli delegation to Agritech. There were about 10 Israeli companies from agro field in Israel. And some of them have, as you asked, yes, branches here in Australia. Others have just agents here in Australia. So some companies that they collaborate with. Okay, so it might come in any form of collaboration. I hope I answered your question.
Yes, thank you. We might talk later about those agents
Okay.
and their
Yes,
roles.
thank you. I think we're at time, and I want to be respectful of people's time as well. I think that we're going to conclude the questions, the Q&A session. What we're going to do is open the communication lines through TechConnect. So if anyone, and Tuvia, I can't write in the chat for whatever reason, so can you write info@techconnect.net, techconnect.wa?
I did already.
Okay, so if the email address is there, please feel free to ask any questions to Jared. We can funnel questions specifically to Jared offline later on, connections, any request or anything. Do not forget, this is exactly why we're here. We're here to provide more information and to provide a service and to connect technology people, especially between Israel, Australia, or in general. So if there's nothing else that anyone wants to say as a conclusion, I would like to thank Jared for an amazing presentation. Thank you, Jared. It really was eye-opening for me. I have more questions actually than I had before. But beyond that, Tuvia, anything else to say before we conclude?
We'll have more webinars in the future. So the next one will be about, I think, agri-tech. Yeah, if I remember.
Basically what Jared was referring, any green energy, renewable energy, all these things that is kind of at the top of mind of a lot of countries right now. That's exactly what we're gonna hit next, and it's gonna happen in about a month from now. So all the idea of solar, desalination, all this stuff, we're gonna talk about that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate your time.
This morning for Israel and this afternoon for Australia. Yeah. Have a nice day. Thank you. Thank you, Jared.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night.
See ya. Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.